Welcome to This Is My Architecture. I am Han, and today we're joined by Luis from TownSq. Welcome.
Thank you, Han.
Before we get into your architecture, can you tell me a little bit about TownSq?
Of course. Well, TownSq is an application designed for managing communities overall. So for homeowners to communicate with their community managers, to get their workflows realized. So all of that around communities like HOAs, condos, this type of thing.
Okay. So can you walk me through the flow of how you get that data?
Of course. So that application that is TownSq that I just described, all of its data lives on our MongoDB. It's our operational database. So what we want to do here on this use case is we actually want to provide insights and benchmarks to management companies about how they're performing their job. So what we do first is actually we enable Mongo change streams in our Mongo database. And in conjunction with Elastic Beanstalk and Apache Camel, we are able to drop that data as it's changing into a firehose. Okay. And the firehose buffers the data and is able to save it all in an S3 bucket that we call the raw zone of our data lake.
Okay. So how do you trigger the jobs to curate the data?
So once the file is saved on the S3 bucket, what actually happens is we trigger a glue crawler. And the glue crawler helps us out in several ways because it classifies our data so that we understand what's on those JSON files. And it creates a glue catalog that we are able to leverage when we're trying to query this data and understand it better. Okay. And we do have another step, which is another glue job that is responsible by deduplicating the data and gets all that data into what we call the landing zone, where at that point it's curated, like I said.
Gotcha. So once that's curated, I see that you have an Aurora database there, right? So what happens next to the flow?
All right. So once the data hits the landing zone, another glue job gets triggered. Okay. And that glue job is responsible for turning this JSON into a star schema. And we use star schema here, mapping out the things that we want to provide insights and benchmarks on, such as the manager's performance, right, the reviews that came from the homeowners. So we transform those into facts in our star schema. And we use the managers themselves, the communities, and time as our dimensions so that we are able to benchmark those things. So for instance, a manager could understand his performance this current quarter against the previous one.
Right. Okay. So how do you enable that data visualization with your star schema and the benchmark?
Of course. So at this point that the star schema is formed, it's very easy to provide, to make queries on it. So we have an Angular application that holds our interface in a CDN in CloudFront. Okay. That we just throw HTTP requests to Elastic Beanstalk that makes the query to the database and the way back to our users, which are community managers at that point.
Gotcha. So what are some of the benefits that you've seen from this architecture?
Well, other than providing the data that we were looking into it, we actually realized that we were able to use the Glue catalog to provide BI reports for ourselves. So we were able to plug in Athena in conjunction with QuickSights and query the data directly from the landing zone. So we don't need to use things such as a Redshift that would be updated every 24 hours.
So what's next for TownSq?
Well, so if you see this as a product, this already allows us to provide insights and benchmarks to our clients, right? Right. But we want to get to a point that we are also providing predictions. So like, is a client of theirs going to churn and maybe leave the company? But for that, it's really important for us to have accounting data there as well. Okay. Because now we have mostly communication and operation of the day-to-day. And for that, we have a middleware that we call the AIS middleware, which pretty much allows us to communicate with the accounting systems that already exist on this market. Okay. So it's a middleware that connects with about 6 different systems at this point. So what is next for us is, as we are using the data from those accounting systems, we are going to actually take that data and drop to our raw zone and start correlating the user behavior to all that data that we have. And hopefully we will find some correlation and start offering those predictions to the clients.
Well, thank you so much for going over your architecture. I think that is very insightful to provide that level of prediction and benchmark to your end user and community, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Han.
And thank you for watching This Is My Architecture.